Welcome everyone. Today we have our another new episode. We will discuss on climate change and energy. We have our world famous speaker, Mr. David Schumacher and Mr. David Smith. First, I would like to give chance, Mr. David Schumacher.
Thank you, Sharif. So, climate change and energy, why are we talking about them together? Well, it's because they're interconnected, and it's an interconnected, critical global issue that we're dealing with. So it's appropriate that we talk about them together. Climate change refers to long-term shifts in temperature and weather patterns around our planet, primarily caused by greenhouse gases such as carbon dioxide, and that's where the energy part of this comes in. The fact that it's affects the entire planet makes it a global issue. So what are some of the things that are going on? Well, the warming of the Earth's surface leads to adverse impacts such as rising sea levels with the melting of ice at the poles and extreme weather events, which I think we're seeing more and more in the news, and we're able to experience firsthand, or at least here in Arizona, we're seeing changes to weather patterns, which are very interesting, in our neighboring state of California, even more so. So the type of energy that we use, the burning of fossil fuels such as coal, oil, natural gas, puts a lot of carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. So it makes sense to think about transitioning to cleaner and sustainable sources of energy to take its place. And one that's in the news, talked about a lot, of course, is renewable energy sources. And what we can do as far as deploying these new energy sources through the uses of subsidies and incentives and supportive policies. We've talked about carbon pricing on World Talent Economy Forum previously, not too long ago, as a matter of fact, and that certainly plays into this. Research and development need to be continuing and ongoing in all these areas. And we need international cooperation because this is a global problem. I look forward to seeing further electrification and decarbonization as we move on, and shows like this help contribute to public awareness, education, so that we can talk about climate change and energy together and have a good combination. So combining the strategies, we can hopefully reduce greenhouse gases. We have to. We can mitigate climate change to some effect, and we can build more sustainable and resilient energy systems as we move forward. And those are my opening comments, Dr. Sharif.
Thank you. Thank you. Now I request Mr. David Smith.
Sharif, thank you so much. And David, great first remarks. And Dan, I haven't seen you in a while. Great seeing you back here. In climate change and energy are locked at the hip. And, climate change has others, particularly impacts as you look at the agricultural side of it, as you look at the seawater and the sediments and stuff, it all can help with that. But energy is one of the major drivers of it. And, the goal we see globally is net zero emissions by 2050. And that's a big jump from where we are today, because today the temperature is still rising every year, and we need to stop that. and beginning to move it back. And, we need to look at all the different ways we use energy. We need to look through how we use it in transportation, how we use it in manufacturing, how we generate it, how do we get the raw materials, particularly on the petrochemical based ones, and how that can impact us going forward. But we're also seeing, though, that there's other key parts of it. We all know that the movement to electric vehicles is supposed to help us as we look at impacting the movement towards net zero as we go forward and meeting the targets out of the last two COPs and out of the Paris Accord. But interesting studies I was reading earlier this week in that one of the most missing critical items for generating clean power and clean energy is high voltage power lines. And that we have a shortage of those that is going to be able to help us meet the needs of just charging the number of electric vehicles that are coming online, much less looking at how to deal with economic growth and development. And if that's true here in the United States, I would imagine it's true as I look globally across all the different emerging countries as well. And so when you look at climate change and energy, it really is, you have to look at the whole ecosystem. You have to look at it from how do I find and extract energy, be it petroleum industry, being it wind power, solar, kinetic power, water power, hydropower, all of those. How do I begin to do those? How do I actually generate the electricity off of them? But then, how do I transport it? How do I begin to get it out to the places? Can I recycle part of that? So for example, if I look at solar power and wind power, is there a way for me to store it so that I can use it at times when the sun is not shining or when the wind is not blowing hard? And looking at new approaches, it was announced about a month ago that a miniature reactor is now been approved that could begin to use for more point of use microgrid type of application. There's promising hope on a small fusion reactor down the road, not anytime soon, but that one, it could be a game changer as we look at how to deal with climate change and energy. Also, as we go down this path, the whole pattern of educating people to be conscious of climate change, to be conscious of energy use, is something that has been failing, and a lot more effort needs to be put in education, particularly from what I understand in the developing world, and that we need to look at how to put appropriate regulations in place that do not inhibit economic development, that do not inhibit advances in science and approaches, but balance everything out to begin to be able to make progress towards the climate change goals. The other thing that I want to put here in this kind of opening remark is that there is a lot of science that can still be done in this area. I'm amazed at looking, for example, the advances in storage technology, not just batteries, which have had some tremendous advances lately, but in being able to use, for example, water movement as a storage mechanism. That when you have excess energy, you pump it into one place. When you do not have excess energy, you let the movement of water through turbines generate energy in a closed loop cycle. And to me, that's a very exciting one, because it really is not generating emissions or anything, and can be used very well. So, Sharif, I think there's a wide range of opportunities to look across the whole energy ecosystem and to balance it with what is happening in climate change today. So Sharif, opening remarks.
Okay, thank you. And now I request Mr. Daniel. First, I would like to give congratulations. So I think you run for vice president for Transhumanist Party. So
Yes,
congratulations.
and we are getting a little bit of traffic sounds from your background noise, Sharif. So it would help your production value to mute, except when you're talking. I know maybe it's hard for a host to do. But yeah, this is my first appearance as the official candidate for the Transhumanist Party with Tom Ross. I'll be running the vice president slot. By the way, is my audio okay? Okay. And David Shoemaker, a fellow amateur radio guy, he knows audio, as the community of amateur radio people worldwide do. By the way, my call sign is KK6VDR, extra class. And there's an interesting energy sort of holiday that happens every year for ham radio buffs. That's called Field Day. It's the first full weekend in June. So June, I guess, 24th through the 26th, you'll see all kinds of people with their communications equipment operating off shore power, as they call it, or off-grid power. So you might want to find a local club. They'll probably be out in a local park or some place with their tents and their crazy antennas. And I just think this is almost indicative of the kind of approach that we need to take with our civilization. I don't know if you guys have heard of the Kardashev scale of civilization. It was a fellow in 1964, Nikolai Kardashev, devised a scale to rank civilizations. Kardashev level 1, level 2, level 3. Right now we are sub level 1. And how Nikolai measured the Kardashev scale was, are you using all the available energy on a planet? See, we are sub level 1 because we're actually burning valuable feedstocks to create energy when we could be completely powering the planet with the convenient fusion power plant that's at a nice, safe 93 million mile distance. The amount of energy that, Robert Heinlein said, it's raining soup, grab a bucket, because we literally get about 1,000 watts per square meter of incident solar energy hitting the Earth's surface. So why aren't we using that? Well, this ties back to another idea that I have, is that we don't value locations properly in our economic system. If you look at the Kardashev scale and we're trying to harvest the energy from our local star, guess what? If you put a collector at a certain location, the guy behind you is not going to have access to that energy coming from the star. So it would make sense to have an economy that values the locations for things like energy and natural resources. Now, another thing we're not doing that we could be doing is interconnecting our power grids, because actually the day and night sides of our spaceship Earth have a surplus and a deficit of energy at the same time. If we had a globally interconnected power grid, we could actually load balance between the day and night side. And David, you're right about the high voltage DC to DC lines would be the intelligent way to do this. You can get amazing transmission efficiencies with million plus volt DC lines. We just do the AC because then we can run it through expensive copper transformers and step the voltages up and down. It's good in some applications, but actually you can get better off efficiency wise with high voltage DC for long transmission. Now, microgrids are another thing that's becoming popular. People are putting Tesla power walls, for example, in their homes, and your car can actually act as a backup power battery. You can run your home off your car in a robust microgrid kind of setup. The average car, I think, is only being used about less than 10% of the time. It just sits there taking up space most of the time. So when a car is not being used, it can function as a microgrid node. And another thing we need to do to make our economy, our Kardashev aspiring economy, more fair and civilized, is to do what Bucky Fuller suggested and have our global currency based on the kilowatt hour. The kilowatt hour is a measure of electricity. It's over time. It's about 1,000 watts used in the course of an hour. And this is a standard unit that is used the world around. Anywhere they use electricity, they know what the kilowatt hour is. So if we had a monetary unit based on the kilowatt hour, we wouldn't be worrying about debt ceilings and currency trading levels and defaults and things like that. That would really be the fair currency standard for a Kardashev civilization. So we have the global energy grid, which I think you can find at geni.net, the Global Energy Network Institute. We have the kilowatt hour money standard proposed by R. Buckminster Fuller, who was one of the most amazing transhumanist design scientists ever. And we have the microgrid opportunity, which is exemplified by people using technology in a peer-to-peer setting, much as ham radio is used. So these are all things I'm going to be carrying forward in my vice presidential platform. And they tie into the climate issue, which is really the biosphere issue. It's really all interconnected. So thanks for letting me make those opening remarks, Dr. Sharif.
Thank you. Mr. David Schumacher, when we discuss about energy, especially for the global war in between Russia and Ukraine, energy become very big challenges for emerging economy. I'm sure it also create impact in Europe, G7, G20, everywhere. So what is the alternative solution we have right now? What do you think?
Yeah, perfect segue to what I wanted to talk about next. So as we look at the power balance, and I'm talking about energy in Europe, we realize that pre the Ukraine invasion, Western Europe is very heavily reliant on fossil fuels coming out of Russia, and was quite happy to do that. France, for example, had spent, and other countries, I'll pick on France at the moment, shutting down their nuclear reactors and working to build renewable energy sources such as solar and wind. But I think as we've talked about previously on the show, we realize that at our current state of development with those technologies, they can't totally replace what's going on with our fossil fuel consumption. Now, the Ukraine war has, I won't reiterate the news, but I think everyone's aware that Western Europe has significantly reduced what they're using from Russia, but they've gone elsewhere to get fossil fuels. Sure, there's some conservation and so forth going on, but I think it comes back to this issue of not fully appreciating the state of where the new version of nuclear energy is at, decommissioning the old energy plants with their old technologies and their old designs. Yes, that needs to be done. Renewable energies need to be developed, but I really see this new wave of new nuclear development, this next generation with improved safety, better efficiency, and sustainability, which I can talk about a little bit, needs to be part of what's going on here. I look forward to what I believe it was Dan said about perhaps fusion coming online at some point. We always seem to be 20, 30 years away from that. Though this time I'm starting to believe more than the last few times that I heard that. There's been some good scientific progress that's been made, such as this sustainable electrical output, being able to withdraw more energy than they put in. That's been done at least one time, I believe it was done at Lawrence Livermore, if I remember right. But this whole idea of new energy, these new reactor designs, need to be expressed to the public. And I like to talk about it whenever I get a chance, because it's solidified in many of us our minds of the nuclear and atomic energy plants of the 50s, 60s, and even 70s. The new reactor designs use different fuels, different technologies. They have built-in safety features that weren't in use before, and they have better control systems. Imagine, compare anything that you own with its 1960s version and today, okay? Telephone, automobile, whatever it might be. We have to have that kind of look when we look at what we're talking about with new energy and not be caught in the old paradigm. Because when I talk to people, the usual excuses of why we shouldn't do that are the ones that are aimed at the old technologies without a realization of what can be done with, say, for example, the new technology nuclear reactors. People immediately talk about waste. Where are you going to store the waste? Do you realize that some of the new nuclear reactors can actually use the fuel of previous generation nuclear reactors and be part of the solution to the waste problem as well? And then smaller sizing, getting them closer, reducing transmission distance helps. One of the other things that we've talked about. So, Sharif, new generation nuclear is an important part of not only what's going on in Europe, but worldwide. And David Smith already mentioned the fact that there's been licensing that we've successfully seen here in this country for at least one business going forward with such projects. And I predict that there'll be many more. That this is a time to seize the opportunity and use these new innovative processes. At least that's another ham radio aficionado's point of view. KD7YD here. I'll pass the baton.
Thank you. Now I request Mr. David Smith.
Daniel, David, thank you so much. I agree, and I too am looking forward to the fusion reactors. I think even though with the advances, they're probably at least 20, 25 years away as we look at it, and ones that can be used in populous areas. But we know we have had many reactors on board ships, on board spacecrafts, and others, and I'm hopeful that we see that, and particularly as it began to be used for point of use generation in mini and microgrids. I think mini and microgrids will help dramatically with climate change because you have increased efficiency and appropriate sizing there. I mean, we also, as we talked before, need to look at the whole infrastructure, the whole grid, the transformers. Transformers really are technology that should be upgraded considerably. The base design of the transformers are still the same ones, for example, on our topic for tomorrow, Nikola Tesla, using some of his technologies and approaches. The other thing is that corporations are begin to see this. And we're seeing more investors wanting to make investments in companies, particularly energy companies that support their ESG goals. And while the investors who want them to do it, the corporations are still coming up the curve. A survey by Ernest Young said that only about half of the corporate CFOs believe that they should spend money on ESG. So you're going to have to begin to really push that way to get there. And again, part of it, this is education, and we need to go back into it. But but everything in our society today depends on stable energy supplies. Uh, Almost everything from agriculture, healthcare, transportation, manufacturing, technology all goes forward with it. And you also have to look at our water resources as well as a big part of that and how it can play. So there are disruptions to the energy supplies. There's interruptions to electrical transmissions and a big strain on the energy system. So you've got to go ahead and begin to use these and a way to impact the air pollution and climate changes, and how to do it. Also, the energy and climate change has environmental issues for the type of social economic standings people have, countries have, and others, and seeing the shift there because we can save energy, we can expand access to clean technologies, we can modernize the infrastructure, we can really look at funding to help us. The last COP's 27 meeting was focusing on making money available to developing nations. And we need to make more and more, as I said before, the infrastructure local with microgrids, mini grids, point of use power generation. And Sharif, these are all things that can dramatically help us address these issues going forward.
Mr. Dan.
Yeah, great points as usual on World Talent here. David, just a little maybe sounds persnickety, but if you want people to support nuclear, you shouldn't say nuclear because it sounds like, oh, it's going to nuke you. I've heard a lot of people that have that pronunciation glitch. But yeah, I am a fan of next gen nuclear when it's done inherently safe, like the new thorium cycle, where it cannot physically melt down because the molten salt will plug off the circulation loop. There's lots of ways to do nuclear in ways that would be more NASA-like. And I think fusion is going to be the way we get around our solar system as we move toward Kardashev level 2 civilization, which I hope to see in my lifetime, where we're using the resources of an entire star in our local solar system to create a civilization of flourishing abundance that us transhumanists are trying to inform people about and not scare them too much. Like some people I actually think are in favor of human extinction. It's I don't know where this came from, but I did think of a little headline, comedy headline: "Humans go extinct. The poor, women, and minorities hit hardest." That would be something that the old Rush Limbaugh crowd would have probably appreciated that joke. He used to make jokes like that. But yeah, I mean, most of our energy is used in residential heating and cooling. Now, you could actually remove that footprint by building more earth-sheltered shelters and habitats. There's something called the constant temperature line in the soil, which is about 6 feet down, where the temperature basically stays right around 60 degrees, no matter what time of year it is or what the weather is like outside. You can actually tie into that constant temperature line without even physically putting the building in line with that location. You can run pipes down into that part of the soil and then use that as a heat transfer, heat pump kind of way. So that would be a big way to mediate our big energy footprint when it comes to energy use for heating and cooling. Now, the other big energy use is transportation. I think 90% of trips are within 5 miles or less. Now, we could easily supplement these short haul trips with heavy lift drones. And it may sound strange, but I think air taxis for people in cargo are coming sooner than you think. We can make them safe by having safety lines that can come out of the ground and retract as the trips are taken, and then they go away. So you're essentially being pulled along a zip line by a drone. And then when you're done with the zip line, it unwinds and retracts back into the ground. This is kind of the idea I've had for a while now about a novel kind of urban transportation solution. I think a lot of intersections could be made into roundabouts, which are actually energy saving because you don't have people stopping and everyone's continuously moving. They're just going around the roundabout and going the new direction. They're not stopping, waiting for cross traffic. I mean, some people can't handle roundabouts. I get it, but most people can. But if you did this roundabout conversion, the nice thing is you could also put these retractable zipline towers in the center of these roundabouts for these heavy lift air taxi trips assists. So what else was I going to talk about? Yeah, I mean, we talk about climate change. It's really a biodiversity loss is just as important as the climate change issue, because there's a biotic pump that's caused by evaporative transpiration in the plants. And right now we've paved over so much of the earth and removed so many plants and so much habitat that we're actually generating about an excess 0.5% heat signature for each calorie of heat that impinges on the earth. So it's really not that big of a footprint that's causing global warming. It's just it's just a half a watt of extra heat energy for every square meter. And if we could just start a global survey, and I'm thinking actually the ham radio community might do a scientific survey about measuring the infrared wattage of each square meter of the earth and saying, oh, well, here's what we need to do to fix this. This square meter over here is over radiating. We could plant some plants here. We could make the pavement more permeable or do something else. The other thing that I'd like to see is the X Prize team that I'm involved with, called Tuvalu-51.org. There's a website for that. And the Giga Carbon Removal X Prize is sponsored by the X Prize Foundation, Elon Musk and Peter Diamandis. It's about halfway through the contest, but there's $100 million of prize money out there, and several teams working on direct air capture. They're working on ocean capture, and that's the part our team is looking at. We've done the calculations that a 30-mile wide belt at the equator of seasteads growing kelp and things like hemp and other feedstocks, that would sequester enough carbon to win the prize, because it's really about a scalable solution that can pull the gigatons of carbon out of the air and ocean that are causing this insulating blanket that's causing this excessive heat for each square meter of Earth. I'm pretty sure it's half a watt per square meter, but you might have to fact check me on that. But anyway, that's language that ham radio folks understand. So I think they could look at this as a public service citizen science kind of project. And that's another thing I'll be plugging, so to speak, in my campaign. And back to you guys. Thanks again. Unmute, please.
Mr. David Schumacher, what you hear about climate change and what you want to add as a concluding remarks for today's session?
Well, there's a lot that we still need to learn and understand about climate change. I think everybody, no matter what side of arguments, viewpoints you might have, might agree on that. And something that's been in the news a lot, something that's being invested a lot these days has been artificial intelligence, especially with with GPT-4. That's created quite the buzz. So I think there's an opportunity for us to talk about being able to apply artificial intelligence. And I think there's a significant role that it can be used for addressing climate change and transforming the energy sector as we move along. For one thing, AI can analyze large amounts of climate data and improve our climate modeling and prediction capabilities, which can help us understand the climate patterns as they change and what we can do about them. We can identify trends and make more accurate projection about what's going on in the future. Very complex subject. That's something that AI can help with. It can also help with optimization and efficiency. The algorithms can optimize electrical systems by analyzing the data from various sources and weather systems and energy demand and supply so that we can have what we need when we need it, where we need it. Can also help us with renewable energy integration so that we get real-time data on weather conditions, weather patterns, and it goes back to supply being able to meet demand or knowing where we need that. Now, there's been some talk about grid management already on the show, but that's another area that it can help in by enabling, once again, real-time monitoring and automation. So it can detect faults, it can predict equipment failures, it can optimize the distribution of the energy. Energy demand forecasting, analyzing historical data and weather patterns so that we don't waste what we've used or what we've built. I think there was some talk already about carbon capture and how we can use that to be, once again, more efficient. And a lot of this goes back to data analyzing, going beyond what we can do or what we've been able to do in the past. It can also help us truly understand what the risks are. We tend to talk about it on a global scale because it is a global concern, but we have to realize that certain parts of the world are going to experience things different than others, and we can be able to take a look at that detail and perhaps be able to make ourselves more resilient in certain areas as we move forward. We can apply it to our agriculture. There was already some talk, I believe, by David Smith about sustainable land use and agriculture, and being able to once again look at what we're doing with irrigation, crop management, pest control, to be able to optimize these. And then lastly, climate change communication, being able to get information to people delivered in ways that might seem unconventional these days through the use of chatbots, virtual assistants, and other interactive platforms that people can go ask and perhaps have some level of personal buy-in as far as the answers, the research, the work that they're doing. So AI is a good thing to talk about right now because it's in the press and it has appropriate uses as we move forward. And with that, I'll pass the baton again.
Thank you, Mr. David Smith. Can you unmute, please?
David, I love
Mr.
the
David,
point you were making there and how they can work and play across all the different sectors and how they're and Daniel, you know, your comments on utilizing the full resources is one that is really true. You know, we see waste everywhere, from, as you talked about, the nuclear fuel waste. We see it in the transmission lines. We see it in transformers. We see so much power generated that is just wasted. And we need to as part of this, look at expending science and technologies to begin to try to solve those problems too. Sharif, you always ask about what can be done in universities, and those are some of the lower hanging fruit that can be done in universities. You do not always have to do things where you're looking at the future of fusion or the others. And Daniel, I apologize for my Texas accent, but sometimes we do pronounce words slightly different here. But even some of the others, Virginia is often on your programs from Brazil, Sharif, and you look at what Petrobras and others are doing in Brazil, they can be models for what other countries around the world can do too, and begin to work on that. The other point I really want to make on this is that each of the regions have different mixes when they look at energy. And what works here in Texas might not work in California, well, definitely not, won't work in Maine, might work in Bangladesh, might not work in Australia and others. But you see those things going, and so it's education, it's how to do that in the whole world and how to put those together. But Sharif, that's kind of the next I think we can do.
I guess it's my turn.
Thank you. Mr.
We're wrapping up here, I guess. It's getting... Well, yeah, I would say that energy comes in many forms, and the universe, in my feeling, is made of divine energy. I think this is a loving, divine quantum creation that goes all the way up to infinity and all the way down to infinity. And I know a lot of transhumanists are kind of atheists or agnostics, but I'm basically a faith-based transhumanist. And I think, as Rainn Wilson has written this book called Soul Boom, Time for a Spiritual Revolution, I think that transhumanism can help us actualize this spiritual revolution by making not only a better, more efficient technology that manages this convergence of nanotech and biotech and infotech, cognitech, all these future surge things, as David Wood calls them, that are converging. But we need the wisdom tech to go with that. And part of that is doing things from love, having an economy where people are doing what they love, and they're producing what they love, they're consuming what they love. So much of what our economy is producing is just habitual kinds of whatnots and widgets that are really not life affirming kinds of production or consumption or technology. Buckminster Fuller, one of my heroes, he called it livingry, which is the opposite of weaponry. Livingry is the stuff that is life affirming, that we produce, that affirms life. Weaponry is stuff that kills life. We need to move from a weaponry based economy to a livingry based economy. As Joseph Campbell, the famous Olympic athlete and mythological analyst, he said, "Follow your bliss." And we really have the potential to have a world brain that is wired up to let everyone follow their bliss. We can make the world work for everyone by making a world that works for everyone, by loving ourselves. And I love the way Jesus boiled it down. They were trying to trap him up. Oh, what's the greatest commandment? They said, no, the greatest commandment is love the Lord thy God with all thy heart, mind, and soul, and your neighbor as yourself. I mean, that's like the whole essence of holiness distilled in one sentence. I happen to think Jesus probably qualifies as the first transhumanist. So I think there's a great case to be made for Christian transhumanism and Islamic transhumanism. We've had a lot of them on our enlightenment salons, Sundays at 1. So that's part of the message I'm excited to carry forward with this campaign that I'm honored to be vice president on the ticket with Tom Ross for the Transhumanist Party. And these problems will be solved with greater creative love, because this is a greater loving creation, and there's no bad that good cannot come from. and everything can be a learning experience. So that's the end of my sermon. God bless you all.
Okay, I have last question for you and everyone. If you win the election, so how you will solve climate change problem and energy problem around the world?
With ham
Mr.
radio,
Dan.
believe it or not. I think amateur radio, the radio sport people, as they're called in other countries, they are about public safety and communication. And you look at the word community, it means community, communication unity. We are here to reach out to other intelligences, and you do that through communication. And who are the experts at science and communication? It's the radio sport hobby. So I think people on amateur radio, they don't like it when you mention politics. And rightfully so. I mean, politics has caused more division and distraction than probably anything. But if we stick to evidence-based science, fact-based things, living grease solutions that work for each other, I think we could do it without politics. We can have a coercion-free society just by using evidence and science and love.
Thank you. Mr. David Schumacher, if as you are a global leader, how you want to solve this climate change problem and energy problem?
Well, it probably wouldn't surprise you to know that I think that at least a major part of solving climate change comes from looking at our problems and reframing them as opportunities, and then putting on our innovator hats and deciding what can we do about this. And I'll give you an example. Some years ago, actually quite a few years ago, I lived in eastern Washington state. It's where I lived was not all that far from the Canadian border, so quite different than Phoenix, where I live now. And even at that time, I was interested in ways to be able to conserve energy. Now, part of that was driven by the cost of energy, because living that far north in the wintertime, it's very, very cold there. So you consume a large amount of energy just keeping your house warm. So I had a house built that was earth burned. So Daniel talked about that earlier, but I took advantage of that constant temperature line. And the south-facing exposure was a indoor patio, solar greenhouse, if you will, that would soak energy up during the day and then re-radiate it at night. And I did have some electric heaters throughout the house to be able to kind of balance the heat out, but I drastically lowered my energy bills and my energy consumption. Now, these days, I live in Phoenix, Arizona, and I have exactly the opposite problem. The winters here are very nice, and the summers were already, for those on the Fahrenheit schedule, doing triple digits pretty much every day. We're right on that borderline of around 100 degrees Fahrenheit, which for those paying attention on the Celsius scale is about 38. So that'll give you an idea. So insulation, of course, here is prime, and then taking advantage of solar technology, because we have an abundance of sunshine here. So besides the large solar plants that are around the state, I, for one, have solar, on the roof as well. The point I'm trying to make here is that different locations have different opportunities and different innovative solutions wherever you go. So Thousand Oaks, California is going to be different than Phoenix, Arizona, and the car is going to be different than either one of these. So we need to be able to look at the opportunities that we have in front of us, put our innovator hats on, and just keep stepping forward. By the way, I think I get a lot of that from my amateur radio hobby too. When I lived in Eastern Washington, I was very, very active in amateur radio, and it taught me about trying to take what you have and build from that, and then share with the rest of the community what you're doing. So I support our VP's call to the amateur radio operators out there. And those are my concluding remarks today.
Thank you, Mr. David Smith.
God, I need to go and remember my old call sign. I remember it was KDL 9565, I think, but hey, that was a long time ago. Yeah, Sharif, thank you. Like I said earlier, this is a very important global topic, and it's a topic that has to be implemented locally, but it has to be planned and analyzed in a global context. Because if one climate change, pollution, greenhouse gas doesn't stop at the border of a country, and it influences all of it. And we've made progress in some areas, like we've been able to reduce the hole in the atmosphere that was there before, and it's dramatically shrunk. But we've seen temperature rising on the other hand, so we need to look at that. And energy is one of the keys, and science and research needs to have a role in there. Being policies, procedures need to. Education. I cannot over stress the role of education to where the average citizen understands their role, the average corporation understands their role, and that there's a role and a place for all of them. We also need to look at the role of innovation. I truly believe that there's so much area to be innovation that we're just in the very beginning stage of it. And Sharif, that's my concluding remarks.
Thank you, everyone. Definitely, climate change is a very important issue. Energy also very important and complex problem right now. So hopefully, with all of our effort, we can solve this dynamic problem. Thank you, Mr. David Schumacher, Mr. Dan, and Mr. David Smith for your continuous support for World Talent Economy Forum. I request all of our audience please share our content as much as possible with the government agency, corporation, and academy. Thank you. Bye bye and take care.